All For One has a plan to take over the world, and Shigaraki wants to destroy the world that All For One wants to take over. When looking at this dynamic of destruction and control, we have to fear for our lives on the state of the heroes in the world of My Hero Academia, because there isn't a single hero that can truly stop the terrors that All For Shigaraki brings, except for one hero, the world's strongest hero, Stars and Stripe. With her insanely overpowered quirk, there really doesn't seem to be a way for All For Shigaraki to defeat her. And this is interesting because this is the quirk that All For One desires to steal. And in fact, obtaining Star and Stripe's quirk is one of the steps that All For One placed in his grand scheme to take over the world. Star and Stripe has the quirk New Order, granting her the ability to assign a new rule to any target as long as she calls its name. With this insane quirk, she was quite literally able to touch the atmosphere itself and create a new rule that the air from 100 meters ahead of her will cease to exist. So no wonder All For One desires to steal her quirk. He honestly will have the capability of making anything do anything, all within the limitations of the quirk albeit, but even that gives All For One enough space to control anything he wants. And this makes me curious, why did All For One feel the need to send an incomplete Shigaraki to try to steal the world's greatest quirk? And that could be a rhetorical question because as we see in the fight between Star and Stripes and Shigaraki, New Order is nothing to play with. Star and Stripe was able to use her quirk to catch lasers, grant her super strength somewhat relative to All Might, and she was even able to bring genuine fear to Shigaraki's eyes with her using New Order to create a rule that if Shigaraki moves at all, his heart will stop beating. But luckily for him, Star and Stripe doesn't know that Tomura Shigaraki is not Shiggy's name, it's Tinko Shimura, putting her in prime position for All For Shigaraki to awaken and steal her New Order quirk. If Star and Stripe were able to somehow put a new order on herself where she can prevent her quirk from being stolen by All For One, that will put the villains at a huge disadvantage, mainly because the heroes will still have Star and Stripe on their side for the final battle against the villains. And to be honest, I wouldn't be able to see the villains winning the war if Star and Stripe survives. She's just too broken. However, on the other side, if All For Shigaraki were to steal New Order from Star and Stripe, it will officially mean GG for the heroes and One For All, because not even a 100% Prime All Might is beating a 100% plus Ultra All For Shigaraki with New Order. If All For Shigaraki were to succeed, this will be a fantastic setup for a My Hero Shippuden down the road, but it's still an open question. Will they succeed? We have been getting closer and closer to figuring out the master plan of All For One, as All For One says that winning the game of hide and seek with the heroes and law enforcement of Japan, all to get Shigaraki to 100% status of All For One, was the short-term objective, and stealing One For All was the mid-game objective. Then why is it that if Shigaraki is a few hours from a few days from perfection, do All For One not just wait and then steal One For All when Shigaraki is 100%? It's likely that All For One believes that even a 100% All For Shigaraki isn't capable of stealing One For All without there being a huge backlash. And so to prevent the possibility of that happening, if he were to somehow get his hand on Star and Stripe's quirk, All For Shigaraki would be able to set a rule on Deku and One For All that would grant him the opportunity to take over the One For All Vestige world, and subsequently move on to his endgame of taking over the world. So now we have to ask a very important question. Why does All For One desire One For All so much? What attribute is in One For All that All For One is seeking to attain? And what is the true end goal for All For One? And well,